When we look at the institutionalization and the evolution of the concept of the executive presidential system, which was brought in by then President J.R. Jayawardene in 1978, there has been so much melodrama surrounding it. Speak to us about the reasons back then that had existed, creating the need for this executive presidential system to be introduced.
Sonali, now when we speak of whether there was a need that existed, if you are asking whether there was a need for the country and the people, now that is a very tricky question, because in my opinion, the best constitution this country had was to a certain extent the Soulbury Constitution. Why I say that is, as a draft, as a constitutional draft, it was complete, it was wholesome. The only thing perhaps that was lacking in that piece of constitution was a Bill of Rights. Except for a Bill of Rights, it was a classic Westminster style parliamentary democracy implementing constitution. Why I say that is because under Soulbury Constitution it was all about institutions, empowering democratic institutions. It was not about individuals. It was not a constitution which was empowering one particular organ which could be run by one person and the power is vested on them. So it was trying to establish a system of governance. And it worked very well. It worked very well until the motivations for something more domestic came through in the 1970s, when the United Front government led by Sirimava Bandaranaike wanted to cut off the continuation of the British Empire, the connections to British Empire. So they came up with this very creative doctrine of autochthonous constitution and homegrown, where they sat outside the parliament as a constituent assembly and came up with a constitution. Now that became the first Republican constitution. The problem with the first Republican constitution, as far as I see, is that it concentrates power on the national state assembly. So the legislature becomes the most powerful organ within the state. So the checks and balances are not there. So this gives more and more power to one organ over the others. Now there were instances where the state assembly had issues with the judiciary then, like a tug of war which was going on. However, even then the head of the state was a constitutional figurehead, like under the Soulbury Constitution, who can be neutral because who was apolitical, was independent, and the role was supposed to be independent, no direct powers, acted in the advice of the Prime Minister, like in the classic Westminster system. So even then the head of the state was a figurehead. Now that has its advantages, because you have a head of the state, because head of the state does a lot of ceremonial activities, ceremonial functions rather, and the figurehead is also the head of the armed forces. So in that sense, when such a head of state is apolitical and independent, it has its own advantages. And also when, say, there are issues or tussles between different organs of the government, there is someone neutral there who can bring those two together, sit and discuss and try to resolve matters. So the system before Sri Lanka transformed into a executive presidency system worked very well for Sri Lanka. So I would not say there was a need per se, because it definitely worked and it works for other countries. I mean, let's forget the West. Let's look our neighbor, India. Are we to say that the Indian Prime Minister is not a powerful person? And it worked very well for Singapore. Singapore didn't have, this is what where we get confused. To be Lee Kuan Yew, you don't have to be an executive president.
Right.
So it works very well for many other countries, and it's working very well as well. So the need, of course, in my opinion, how I see history, from my understanding of the history, is that J.R. Jayawardena wanted it, and he thought that is the way forward, that is the way this country could be taken forward, where it's the power is vested with one person, like a monarch maybe. And it is in that ethos we see that later executive presidents being hailed as Maharajanani, and that kind of thinking is coming in. So if you ask me whether there was a political need or need among the people for an executive presidency, no, but there was an individual political need for J.R. Jayawardena and his allies, and it was his vision. He thought this is the way forward for the country, and he brought that in. So it was not a people-led movement.